I wrote down a lot of comments, and I'm going to try to move through them quickly. In answer to your question, I have concerns about the physical design for the trail, and that would be my answer is no, at this time, the current design of the trail, I would not recommend that Superintendent Williams direct his staff to continue the work. I found the last meeting, the geotech reports and the wetlands reports, incredibly informative. In a sense, I felt as if the work of this pathway, I'd envisioned it started because we began to have the science of this place that we've been talking about, and we got that at that meeting, which was just the fourth meeting, the one before this. And as a person commented one of the early meetings, I believe we need to lead with the science on this. We still don't have enough information to ensure that this sensitive land is properly identified and described. And that's really one of the principal reasons I'm suggesting not moving forward. Our community, the City of Seattle, values the protection and preservation of nature, and the preservation of that nature cannot be established without adequate science. So what we learned last month from the reports, and it was particularly informed when I went on the first couple hours of the walkthrough a week ago, Friday, that this whole area is just permeated with wetlands, steep slopes, say that fast, and slide-prone areas, which, in reality, left undisturbed is the way to preserve them. We learned that the geotech reports are preliminary. We learned the wetlands haven't been delineated yet. We're traversing and drawing maps through 11 wetlands. And the kind of, I'll say, infrastructure that needs to be set up in order to try to preserve what's something that exists right now in our natural habitat seems incredibly extensive. I walked away from last meeting with a very clear understanding that this project needed high-level professional workers in there, that it's less likely than envisioned to be volunteer-led, and that it is potentially incredibly much more expensive than what was envisioned in some early conceptual drawings. Let me be really quick. I also note that the current design keeps moving deeper and deeper into the quality habitat of the forest. I disagree that when you look at Chiste Forest overall, that it is it's been characterized as, almost completely invaded with invasives. When you get into that quality forest, when we walk in there, that is really not true. I don't know what the percentages are, but I think it's important to recognize that, and I think that gets lost in the comments. We've identified that the maintenance yard potentially has serious environmental consequences to the area and also produces drainage into the area. So I still see this area as incredibly sensitive, worth protecting, and that for the quality of life and for what an environmentally natural area gives us as citizens in protecting drainage, tree canopy, quality of life, that is significant and worth preserving.
I'm assuming you would say so. No point in talking about evaluation criteria or continued.
No, I wouldn't make that assumption because I think that the evaluation criteria has come a long way. I particularly, Doug, respected and felt informed more than the piece of paper by your comments today. And so my comment coming in before the meeting was going to be that we talked last time about setting real criteria, and I heard you say that, and I still hadn't seen it here. So I was pleased with that. I had actually worked up a little model of what I thought could be a way to measure trail creep, and I'd be happy to send it to you. But it's really, we've got a certain amount of square footage of land that's going to be developed into trails, and if you know, if that increases because the trails are wider and they're deeper and they slide, then you can measure that. And so I will offer you, I have a little bit of time in the trade of developing the evaluation criteria, and I'd be happy to do that, but I was very pleased to see that. And, you know, if we get to having these trails here, they've got to be monitored, and so I'm invested in what that would look like. I also agree, as Weston said, that we need some level of parks and staff involvement in that evaluation criteria and making sure that it gets measured, that reports are turned in, that, you know, we really do have benchmarks and information coming in consistently, or the evaluation criteria isn't meaningful. You know, lastly, I will say that I might have taken a different tact on the third question. I strongly believe that there needs to be a project manager assigned to this, and I understand enough about how Parks is organized that this project would move into the project development, or whatever that's called, where somebody who really knows project management and can draw on the resources of the geotechs and the landscape architects and everybody within Parks to make it happen. It's critical, and I go back to the geotech reports we saw. This has become in my mind, it's become an increasingly more complex project that needs professional project management. That said, you raised a cost issue, and in my experience, community projects from advisory councils, all of those pay for their project manager and all the loaded costs for a project manager within the project budget. So I would just make the note that I would hope that Parks would continue with its ongoing policies of having project management and all of those technical resources that go along with it paid for as part of the project, because I think it's really important, and I think we really learned that through the geotech and the wetlands people. We can't, I mean, I'm a volunteer, and I respect volunteers' work, and we have some very highly technical specifications that we're now learning about that need to be applied on this project. So, my comments.
Thank you, Sarah. Connie?
Thank you. It's been interesting working on this project here, and I came in with an open mind, and it's been closed. On the first question, I say no, because I feel that I was not given more than one choice, and it did not conform to the city council ordinance. And especially with the number of wetlands in the forest. If I had to have an evaluation criteria, then I would go along with what you have started to develop, and Doug made it a lot clearer today when he was presenting it. So if I had to have an evaluation checklist. On number 3, between no, I would not want it to go forward, but if it were to go forward, it certainly would need proper management. And my no is that we were not given a chance to explore more ways to accomplish this, or even if this was the best choice. I'm concerned about the parking and what's going to happen, especially on my block, because I'm on 25th here, and you have an entry right there. And will the parking come on my block? Probably so. And I'd like to know, where is the money coming from for parks?
Thank you, Connie. Kathy?
Yeah, can you come back to me? I need a few more minutes just to formulate.
Dan?
Daryl, you ready? Should I jump in? Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like everyone's saving up for the end to do the last rebuttal. Good tactic. Okay, thanks everybody, and thanks again to the folks that have been showing up week after week, even if we don't always agree. It says a lot about our community that we actually give a expletive. And so I've moved in a lot of directions in this project. The public meeting we had in March of last year, I was really concerned about this project. I hadn't heard about it. And I live in the neighborhood, and I was on listservs, and maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention, but I felt like that I should have known about it by that point. And when I saw the initial trails map, I was very concerned. I thought it was way too dense and didn't match with my values. My background's in natural history and being an interpreter. My first job was bringing kids to wetlands at the Mercer Slough in Bellevue. And I really see the power of getting kids out into nature, especially into wetlands. So that was I was not necessarily opposed to mountain biking in the woods. I think what concerned me from day one is that people were making assumptions that walking trails, and I was surprised to see that there's so much support in the community for a walking trail. So I guess I just missed that you all were in favor of having some trails. But again, my concern is that we're making assumptions that, oh, a bicycle, therefore it's going to be worse for wildlife than walkers. My experience at Discovery Park, and we didn't allow mountain biking on the pedestrian trails primarily from a maintenance perspective because they were not built for mountain biking, they were built for walking. But in terms of impacts on wildlife, and I did a lot of research while I was there, there's a significant impact in our city from off-leash dogs. But the research even suggests dogs that are on leash. So again, making this assumption, and not to say that we couldn't have a nature trail and say there aren't supposed to be dogs, but I run around Jefferson Park all the time. There are off-leash dogs everywhere. There's not supposed to be off-leash dogs there. There's no enforcement in the city for this concern. Part of that is because dog owners are a very significant lobby. They have a lot of money, and it overrides some of our concerns. So the assumption that bicycling is going to be bad for wildlife and walking or doing nothing is going to be better, I don't think the data supports that, and that was a concern and why I wanted to get involved. Through the process of seeing week after week, and again, part of this is trust. There were issues I saw when we had the presentation about the wildlife being present or not being present. And these are issues that the community is going to have to address, but to some extent we have to have some faith that a professional geotech saying that building trails, if done the right way, can have a positive impact on the stability of these slopes. We have to trust that that professional is saying it has some credibility, that there's no significant wildlife impact from having people in this area. But the most important part is what Weston said, which is there already are people in there and they're doing destructive things already. And so it's not this utopia of we will have a pristine area that no one can go in. From my natural history perspective, I might have approved that to some extent, but the reality that's not happening. So that's my very long lead up to saying that as it stands right now, I do support the current physical design. To be completely honest, and I exposed this to a couple folks yesterday who I think assumed that I was like gung-ho for this project from day one. This trail is exactly how I wanted it to look, and I'm happy that at least one person here is happy about this, because and I don't think I had much influence to make it this way, to be honest with you. But the one concern that came up from the community during the meeting is that did change my mind, is that from a safety perspective, having little ways that people can quote-unquote escape if they feel unsafe, that is a reason for cross trails, or at least taking a different look at occupying different sections of the interior. So that was one area that I did change my mind on during the process. And additionally, I do feel that one of the initial concerns from the people I heard from was having an ability to get through the property from a transportation, not necessarily bicycling transportation, but walking transportation. So I do support this, but I do think based upon some of the input that we received that we should have some additional thought to where to minimize social trails. We might include some cross-trail aspects, but overall, I really like the amount of activity that's going on here. I definitely don't think it's too much or too little for the most part. Number two, and thanks for enduring that very long explanation. It was a little windy, I apologize. Number two, the current evaluation criteria. I mean, this looks incredible. I just wonder, does any parks project, I mean, maybe I don't know, but it just seems like, wow, we're just like under the needle here. And I'm great if Parks has budget now with the new Parks District to go. I would think we should be doing this in every park. I mean, Discovery Park was the largest park in the city, and we had to like scrimp and save to get any help from Parks when I worked there. And granted, that was during the recession, but so let's monitor and make this sure that we're doing the right thing here. I just don't know if it's equitable to put all that burden on a group of volunteers. I think we really need to be honest about whether that's really equitable for people who have spearheaded this to begin with. So yes. Okay, sorry. Number three, I do recommend that this goes through to Christopher Williams. But again, I just really have a hard time with this cost to build the trail will be paid for by Friends of Cheesty Green Space at Mountain View. This is our neighborhood. We deserve to have some investment from the city. And for this, the whole impetus of this PAT was to make sure this project is done right. And we saw from the experts that it can, by doing it right, means that it will be the best thing for our neighborhood. And to depend upon a group of volunteers to raise money for the whole thing, I just don't think that's fair. And I think it's, for the Parks Department, it's with its budget to think that Southeast Seattle shouldn't have access to some of that budget. I think that's not right for our neighborhood. But again, this doesn't ask for that detail that says yes or no, so I'm going to have to say yes.
Thank you. Melanie?
All right. Thanks, you guys. Thanks, everybody, for hanging in there. Thank you all on the PAT for being this team. I've learned a lot from all of the meetings and your insights and intelligence, and I appreciate that. I started, I guess my first experience with Cheesty was when my dad actually had a house off of Cheesty Boulevard, and I went into the woods and I found it to be like overwhelmingly covered in English ivy. There's trash, and there were encampments, and I talked about it with someone and they said, oh yeah, the police have been sweeping this area for a body. It was actually quite terrifying. Last year, I brought in a group of volunteers. I brought in 100 volunteers for an Earth Day event. And I was surprised at how much change had already happened due to the volunteer work that's already taken place. And it was an extraordinary day. It was pouring rain, but the volunteers had an amazing time. They were just like joyous to be out in nature, and especially having not had to drive out into a mountain to experience that, and to actually get to like look up at trees and take care of them. And so I see a lot of positives with this project. First, I see the positives for the environment. I come in with this with an environmental background, and I know that if we put a fence around this project and leave it alone, the trees are not going to be taken care of. They will get so much ivy onto it that they will have blowovers in the wind. The erosion will be impacted because ivy covers the ground with a low root system and does not allow for the native species to flourish. It hurts the habitat for our animals, and so for these reasons we do need to have people interact with the woods and take active restoration. I'm also very encouraged by the social aspect. I love seeing the community come out. That project that I led was amazing. It's a beautiful thing to see people come out. It's beautiful to see the connections happen.